Hi there. In this video, I want to talk about the entire history of your laziness and how it's not true and how you can stop believing it. The thing is, you are naturally productive. That's how you begin. That's the software that comes out of the package from the factory. Naturally productive. And you may not feel naturally productive currently. So I want to talk about how that happens. How do we go from being this naturally productive, curious, creative person to believing that we are lazy, not motivated, flawed deeply. Now, how this happens is basically the first thing is we introject something about ourselves that isn't true. And this can happen very early in our life. So that natural identity, that part of us that is naturally productive, it's not really even such much a conscious identity, but it's just what it is. It's just almost a state of being that we are. We are all naturally productive, naturally curious. We all want to take on more responsibility as we grow. But we take in an introjection, something from the outside environment teaches us that we are not who we really are. And that's basically the problem. Okay. Now, what will happen after that is you will live your life as if you are this person who is lazy, and that will be the identity that we have. And then you'll start to look externally. You'll be around, watching videos, maybe like some of mine, on YouTube and different places, trying to get the answers to the problem of your laziness. And there's many of those types of videos out there. They'll tell you all these productivity hacks and things that you need to change and tweak and get motivated and get organized and make plans. Really take things seriously this time. But it never really addresses the fundamental problem of this identity change that happened maybe before any of that stuff, right? The fundamental problem of seeing myself as lacking in something. So we turn to all those videos, and then we'll try to implement a lot of the strategies, and we'll run its problems because it doesn't really address any of the real problem. So what this entire history looks like, okay, we have this identity problem, seeing ourselves in this light. And that is very demoralizing. It's inherently seeing ourselves as not enough, as in lacking something fundamentally flawed. And that does feel like low motivation. That does feel like apathy. It feels like, what's the point? It's not going to work anyway. Nothing I try works in my life. That's kind of phase one. Okay, so that's when we introject this identity. We believe it about ourselves, take it to be true. We will experience this apathy, this lack of motivation. Now, instead of maybe doing what's truly helpful, which would be to question that, the next thing that will happen in this history of our laziness is that we will develop this thing within ourselves to handle that problem of, well, this is me, this is the lazy self that I am. And it will always be this really, really demanding, controlling, high expectation thing that we develop within ourselves. And I really want you to understand that it's a strategy to solve the problem. It's a strategy to solve a problem, a non-existent problem. And it is always in its nature extreme. So I'm not good enough. I'm this lazy person. Nothing ever works for me. Okay, that's taken as granted. Now, the solution will be an extreme solution. It's an extreme problem, so an extreme solution is required. Now, this is unconscious, right? In fact, all of this is unconscious, what I'm talking about. Most of us don't really know how harsh we are on ourselves with that false identity. It's so disturbing to us that we don't even want to look at it. But that's, it tends to show up externally in our behaviors, right? It's as proof to ourselves that we are that identity. But this thing that we develop then after that is this extreme solution, and is always going to be, in order for you to get out of this hole that you're in, you're going to have to do this, this, and this. And not only do this, this, and this, do them all perfectly. In fact, it may still not be enough. It probably won't be enough. But this is the solution here. You got to do extremes of things to get over the initial problem. So it's very controlling. It's what I really want you to understand about it is it actually can never be satisfied, because it's not willing to turn around and look at the original problem and to question it. It doesn't even want that. So it's an extreme thing. So you've got to be the most productive, the most creative. Everything has to be done to the highest possible standards. And I mean, if the original identity is interjected and taken as true, I mean, that sounds reasonable to us, right? You may notice in yourself, you have these high expectations, you have this issue of perfectionism, things like this. Well, this is where this is coming from. It's an attempt to compensate for the lacking identity that we developed, right? So when that's there, we will say, okay, that's rational. And then we will go into trying to implement all of those high expectations and demands that part has drawn up for us. Some people would describe it as, and I like it too, it's this idea of sort of covert contracts. These are the rules to get out of jail. And then we try and implement them. So we're seeking now in this next phase of our story. We're out there and we're trying to implement. And remember, really, really high standards. We make big plans for ourselves. And we're trying to do it. Now, what is far more common at this point, when we're trying to implement all these big plans, is that we won't be able to. So we'll be spending quite a lot of time here making up big plans. I had this problem. I had this real recurring tendency to make big plans for myself, for the day, for the week, maybe the month even, right? And of course those plans, which is the most common outcome here, for me, those plans very, very, and I mean very rarely got done at all. In fact, most of the time I wouldn't even be able to start implementing the plans after I drew them up. Maybe I'd draw them up the night before, and the next day I wouldn't even begin with them. And that's the most common outcome. What's also very common is you try it a little bit, but you barely make a scratch, right? You're scratching the surface of this big plan. And what is the outcome is shame. A self-attack. So this is really now reinforcing the original problem. I really am lazy. This is proving to myself that I'm this lazy person. So that's much more common. You try to implement the strategy, the plan, the covert contract, and it doesn't work. And you attack yourself. But it reinforces the original problem. Because remember, the original problem wasn't questioned. It won't be questioned. And when it's held as a belief, it will look for evidence. And this is one of the ways it gets us to show the evidence. It gives you these huge plans. You don't really have a hope of implementing them. Because that's not how your nervous system works. Your nervous system doesn't respond well to huge requests. Well, not requests, demands. So that you'll end up attacking yourself, and this cycle of shame and guilt keeps going on. Now, the other thing that can happen in our story occasionally is you have the big, massive plan, the high expectations, the expectations for perfection on yourself. You try to implement them, and by some miracle, occasionally, very occasionally, you'll be able to pull it off. You'll do the plan, okay? And that could last for a day, could last for a week. But in any case, what will happen is, and I've experienced this too, but not very often, but I've heard it from people. What will happen there is you've done the plan, and there's a marked absence in giving yourself any credit for it. Right? So even if you do pull it off, and think about this, ask yourself this question, if you've ever actually achieved that, and it's rare, by the way, that people actually are even, it's much more common that people don't even get off the ground with it, but if you do actually manage to pull it off occasionally, notice how long did you spend saying, good job, really well done on that one. In my experience, that never happened. I don't think I ever did that once with this. Because you see, that undermines the original problem too. People who are lazy don't deserve pats on the back. They're maybe I won't attack them right now is what they get for all their efforts. Another thing that can happen in our story at this point is you've managed to pull off the big plan. And you'll notice nobody really cares. I'm after doing all this great work here and all these things, and nothing's changed. And the truth is because nobody cares. Only us. That's one of the things I really like about focusing on this topic of productivity and things, is that I came to know that nobody cares about your productivity. Not really. Not in the way we think that they do. You see, because the problem is we have this sort of a real sense of a lack of self-esteem with it all, right? And we think that through productivity, we're going to get this great sense of self-belief, and people will respect us, and people will look up to us and really appreciate everything that we're doing with these huge efforts. And then what you find out is that nobody cares, because it was all in our own mind. Nobody will care. Now, when you can really see the truth to all of this, it's much more about a happiness and a letting go of all the pressure, and not needing it to be the fulfillment for our lacking sense of self, right? Because really, when it all comes full circle, we realize the only problem here is this low self-esteem, this false identity thing. And the solution is to go into a rejection of all that. This is the proper use of denial. We can be in denial about the false self can be there, and we haven't questioned it, and we can go into denial about it. I don't want to look at that. Now that's the improper use of denial. The proper use of denial is to look directly at that false identity and say, that's not me. I denied this after having looked at it and seen what it is, how little evidence there is for it, and certainly what it leads to. Guilt, fear, anxiety, shame. And it was somebody else's idea, usually, or someone else's projection onto you, more than likely, almost certainly. But that's what it comes down to. It's we're all looking for these hacks in how can I do this, how can I tweak this externally. And there's a time and a place for a little bit of that, right? That's fine. But if it isn't going to bring us to the place where it's like, who is this person who's struggling? Well, he's the lazy guy. She's the unmotivated one. She's defective. Unless we're going to get to the point where we're going to get seriously looking at that, nothing will really make much difference anyway. Even if you do manage to pull off all the big plans, it won't make any difference to how we really feel about ourselves, the relationship we have within ourselves. That won't change. So all I'm saying is, like I talk about it in my book on procrastination, about changing your story. And that's a really important part of changing this. But it's also like tied into changing the sense of identity we have as how we see ourselves. Who is this person who is this terribly unmotivated individual? And is that real? Is that me? And when exactly did I become that? Was I always that? You were never that. That's the thing. So it's about like your true identity if you can start to realize that's the goal, that's where it's all going to change. Because if I can get in touch with the true identity, by the way, right, your true identity is naturally productive. Here's another thing about your true identity. This might sound a bit strange. It's always safe. It doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. It's naturally creative. It's naturally loving. It's naturally compassionate. It's naturally sharing. This is who we really are. And when we are in touch with that identity, when it does come time to turn outward externally to start to do things in the world, it's not going to be these gargantuan demands and impossible standards that we set for ourselves, looking for perfectionism. Another part of your identity is you're absolutely free at all times. You were born free. That is who you are. That's your identity. So when we are in touch with this identity, it's like, well, okay, it's now not about proving or getting. It's about extending. It's about expressing freely, experimenting. That's what it's about. It's not about high standards. It's about decisiveness, because you have clarity of mind from that place. You're not conflicted with yourself. So, and then you go out, you have these experiences. You're doing things, you're experimenting with things. So you notice some of them work, some of them don't work. But there's no anger or guilt. There's no self-attack. There's only really self-appreciation. Another thing I found is there's an awful lot of surprise, because it's a really beautiful thing when you are in touch with that true identity and you're living from that space. You just watch yourself be productive. It just happens all by itself, right? There's no real need to push, to struggle, to convince yourself, to berate yourself. It's very, very natural, okay? So I hope my videos are kind of like just little reminders for you to realize, okay, I can take a deep breath. This isn't as serious as I think it is. It's not going to get me what I think it is. Who I am, my genuine identity, is enough. That's really the thing that I want. And once I'm in touch with that and I'm spending more and more time getting still to connect with that part of myself, there will be this natural extension externally. So if you want to, I hope that these videos are useful. You can check out my book on procrastination also. It's basically about undoing all the guilt that underlies all this and perpetuates that low self-esteem, that false self-image that we have. And I really hope it's useful for you. And if you want to contact me, you can do so also. I'm available for one-to-one therapy sessions also. Hope that was a useful video today, guys, and I really appreciate you watching, and I will see you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.